it's getting better before it gets worse. What's up, everyone? What's going on? And welcome to the Stokastic Fantasy Football Channel, or welcome back, of course, to those of you returning. My name is Matt Savoca at Draftaholic, and I'm here, as I am every single Wednesday, breaking down the running back position with the man, the myth, the legend,
Sir.
Nick Lepri at Notorious FNTSY. We ever talked about this? Like, where did this come from?
I don't know. I do it all the time.
Like,
It's like
hit
the
the
like
hit
button.
the thumbs up, like hit the like button. It's like
Yeah.
it's like when
Like
people
button
just
dance.
like got really into smash that like button.
Yeah, they fucking like scream and they point like directly at the camera. Hit that like button. And like some graphic pops up and makes like an explosion noise when they do it. Old YouTube was so funny.
Yeah.
In 2014.
The first tropes, right? It's like, you know how you were in elementary school or middle school and like fads like truly made their waves through the school, right?
Yeah.
But then they were like immediately dropped. YouTube had to go through those first like tropes and fads, and some of them a little cringy. But the running back position has also been a little bit cringy this year at times. Tier 1 is drastically dwindling at this point in the season between the bye weeks and the injuries. It's just been a absolute bloodbath at the running back position, and the injury to Breece Hall is just another salt on the wound. We do have some familiar faces in Tier 1, but I think the first person, as we throw up the graphic for our Tier 1 running backs here in Week 8 for fantasy football, Josh Jacobs, man, the guy gets opportunity in a way that no one else does at this point. You know, a few others, but now with Christian McCaffrey going to the San Francisco 49ers and no longer being that volume hog, Josh Jacobs' rest of season looks like a top 3 running back.
Yeah, it's honestly hard to project him not to be a top 3 running back at this point. I've gotten a lot of trade questions about Josh Jacobs. People asking, do I think Josh Jacobs can keep it up? And I mean, based on what we've seen, I would have to think so. The guy has been incredible. The team really commits to this running back workhorse scenario. It really looked like going into the year, this was going to be another one of those seasons where we have the Raiders or any of these teams just have a committee. But now it really does appear that they want Josh Jacobs to be the guy. And Josh Jacobs has looked the part. He's not like the biggest pass catching running back ever, but he's been catching more balls than he did earlier on in his career. And I'm very excited for what this guy can do this year, because I really think he could finish as the number 1 guy, if I'm being honest with you.
Number 2 among running backs in snap share, number 1 in total opportunity share, 5th in carries, 18th in targets, 2nd in fantasy points per game. The New Orleans Saints, his opponent in Week 8, isn't the best running defense, and that's weird to say because New Orleans typically is the best running defense.
Yeah.
The only other person who has a chance in terms of opportunity value and obviously in terms of ceiling potential, Derrick Henry going against a bad Houston defense, and Saquon Barkley. I guess if you're talking about in terms of a defense's ability to stop another opponent from getting another first down, there's no one worse than the Seattle Seahawks. So Saquon Barkley absolutely deserves to be in this Tier 1, this S tier this week as well.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley's kind of just locked into that tier number 1. If you could have told me that this is what was going to happen in May or June when he was being drafted in like the 3rd round, I'd probably be a very rich man come the end of the season. This is incredible. And I think you tried to tell me that this is what was going to happen. I just didn't listen. But
over and over and over and over again, I told you. Obviously, the injury risk is still there. Knock on wood, everyone. But on the field, he's awesome. On the field, when healthy, he is awesome.
And real quick, just to go back to Josh Jacobs before we pivot away, we just saw Eno Benjamin run train on the Saints. So imagine what Josh Jacobs can do.
Well, easy as that, right? We literally just saw it's not impossible for him to fail, but boy, the chance to succeed is looking good. Just Bob, good morning. What's up, man? Nick Jackson, what's going on? Josh Reacts. How are you, buddy? Lots of familiar faces. Ron the GOAT, as always. Alex, how are you, man? Good to see you all. Let's jump into tier 2, because if you're benching Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, or Saquon Barkley, did you drink paint thinner or something? I don't know.
Who doesn't do that?
We can help you seek medical attention if that's the case, but start those players. Ramondre Stevenson is the one who, even with Damian Harris back, with so much work in the passing game as well as in the rushing attack, you're going to get 20 opportunities, you're going to do just fine. And Travis Etienne, like I was saying, finally finds the end zone. Tough matchup in that London slate. But hey, he is a great, great value rest of season with no more James Robinson.
Yep, I agree on that. Definitely. I like Ramondre Stevenson as well. A lot of people really panicked on Stevenson last week because Damian Harris was returning. And look, I think Damian Harris is a good running back. I think they ramp him up a little bit more in terms of production as the weeks go on. But right now, you just have to continue to bang the drum for Ramondre Stevenson because of how good he's looked as the guy on the team. And I would find it hard to believe that Damian Harris does become the guy unless there's an injury.
Oh, no, no way. The way that Ramondre Stevenson has looked with the ball in his hands and evaded tackles per touch, top 3 in the NFL right now. And obviously, even when the Patriots are behind, they're not really a team equipped offensively to get back in the game. But if they're going to dump the ball off this much to Stevenson and negative game scripts,
Yeah.
he's going to be just fine. He's going to Austin Eckler North. Is that a weird thing to say? I thought we were talking about DeAndre Swift that way. Hey, Alex, thanks for the super chat, man. I'm going to throw that onto the screen here. If Swift doesn't play, talk about Austin Eckler North. Would you play Jamal Williams, Raheem Mostert, or Travis Etienne? I think you have to play Travis Etienne as a starting running back. But after what we've seen with Jamal Williams in Detroit when Swift sits, he's pretty much an every week starter as well.
Yeah. To me, I like Raheem Mostert, but he would not even be a part of this equation. To me, it's kind of just between Williams and ETN. I think I would probably lean with I'd lean with Jamal Williams, stick against the Dolphins. Now, I know what the stats say that the Dolphins have been better against the run, but what the eye test tells me, as someone who watches every game, is not the best against the run. It really isn't. I think Jamal Williams could have a field day. I would lean with Jamal Williams, but again, it's incredibly close. And we're just gonna have to pray that Swift plays because if he doesn't play, oh man, it's just what could have been is what we'll think about in the offseason, like what this season could have been.
I know we're almost at the lost season standpoint with him. He could still be a league winner on a per game scoring basis, the way he looked on the field before he went down with an injury. Kenneth Walker, speaking of looking good on the field, another breakaway run touchdown last week, gets the Jets this week. I think actually Seattle's playing the Giants to be corrected there. Seattle's playing the Giants. That's Saquon Barkley versus Kenneth Walker. Geno Smith versus Daniel Jones. Ezekiel Elliott is the one who looked injured, came back, scored a touchdown. I do not have him ranked this high. This is based on the Stokastic projections, which power the same DFS projections that have won people literally millions of dollars over at the Stokastic DFS side of things. Get started today, by the way. There's some awesome winners going on. I saw our CFO, Steve Buzzard, took down 2 100K prizes in the NBA last night. I think our projections are doing just fine. But ultimately, in my gut, if you're asking me just, how I'm ranking my players, if I'm not looking at stats, which, by the way, I am usually, Ezekiel Elliott's not at 7. Taylor's ahead of him. Pierce even is ahead of him. Nick Chubb's ahead of him. But ultimately, Ezekiel Elliott in this plus matchup in a game that Dallas should dominate start to finish is going to look good in our projections and rankings.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I do think that Ezekiel Elliott does have more upside than I thought he was going to have, just because of the fact that he has looked a lot better. And it seems like even with Dak Prescott under center, the team doesn't necessarily just want to commit back to being with Dak and throwing the ball like 40 times a game. I think they only threw the ball 25 times, something like that. Again, that's just a rough estimate, around 25 times last week. And that's a little surprising, in my opinion. I thought they were going to look back to trying to throw the ball a little bit more aggressively with Dak under center. And that leads to Zeke having some solid games. And obviously, they still have Tony Pollard. You're always going to have to worry about the fact that Tony Pollard is about 30 times better than Ezekiel Elliott. But the team just wants to keep using Zeke, so you got to keep rolling him out there. And then I know I marked Kenneth Walker incorrectly going up against the Giants. He's going up against the Jets. But the most interesting thing about Kenneth Walker, did you see the picture he posted on Twitter after the game where the Chargers fan was flipping him off, giving him the double birds, and then he flipped the fan off and he posted the picture on Twitter after he scored that huge run?
I mean, that's a heck of a run, I will say that. Dalvin Cook, who got fined for throwing the ball into the stands, has a great matchup against an Arizona defense who has not been able to stop the run. Jonathan Taylor, I've said this in multiple streams, if only Jonathan Taylor could get used the way that Deion Jackson got used when he was the bell cow running back for that 1 week. Indianapolis is a tough team to project, guys. Obviously, with Sam Ellinger coming in for Matt Ryan, who is quote unquote injured, we have no idea how often this team is going to be in the red zone, the pace of play. As you said, it could be okay, especially for a player like Taylor, who will probably be leaned on by a quarterback who has no experience whatsoever. But the touchdown potential is significantly lower for Taylor than we thought at the beginning of the year. That's just the bottom line. Still have him in the top 12, but just barely.
Yep, I agree with you. I think Ellinger might look to dump the ball off at a crazy rate to him because just again, like it would make sense, right? You're Sam Ellinger. This is your first game ever. Let's just dump the ball off 7,000 times to the best player. That would make the most sense. But who knows if that's actually what's going to be happening. I am definitely somewhat panicked on him. Going into the year, I was very confident in Jonathan Taylor. And even with Matt Ryan under center, we were starting to panic. So now the panic has set in even further. I got a question yesterday that I'd just like to ask you your answer to this question. Would you rather have rest of season McCaffrey or Jonathan Taylor? My answer was McCaffrey.
McCaffrey. Now, it's scary because the volume wasn't there in week 1 when he got there on Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
On his touches, Lepri, did you actually
Good.
watch the game, bro? Did you actually watch the game? Because
I don't watch any of the games.
you just line up and read the matrix that is the stats. No, if anyone does that, it's me. But ultimately, I threw on the game and I was amazed at how good Christian McCaffrey looked. Just fantastic.
Yes.
Basically on every single touch. He is going to be a game breaker on that team, even if he doesn't have 25 opportunity upside like he used to. Even if he gets 15 to 18, which is where I think he'll settle, he will dominate. And I think we need to talk about him because right now in our projections, the volume is what's sort of pushing him down. And if you're ready to move to tier 3, I am, because the player we don't see is maybe the most important. There he is at 15, Christian McCaffrey, probably his first real workload, his first real chance to see what he's going to be as a 49er. It was a little preview, a little taste last week, but I think 15 is bearish. He's got top 10 potential, no doubt.
I think we also probably would have seen more McCaffrey had they not have been getting the dog shit beat out of them by the Chiefs, right? If that was maybe a closer game, maybe we see more McCaffrey. Interested to see his workload this week. I was watching, I don't know, we have so many shows on the Stokastic DFS channel that I don't even know the name of all of them, but I was watching the show yesterday with Lofty and Ben, where they were talking a lot about Jeopardy, but they also talked about how they are both concerned about McCaffrey and DFS this week because of his price tag. I understand the price tag is high, but I really do think in his second week there, he could be a top 3 back in fantasy.
Top 3?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll take the over, like he'll be 4 or greater in the rankings.
Okay. That makes sense. I'm just saying, do you think that's possible?
Oh,
Because
yeah,
I
it's
still
possible.
think it's very possible.
I was trying to do a little bet with you. Maybe a little off air. We'll do a little wager.
Well, I mean, that's a very bullish take to say top 3.
I understand. I recognize. We set a fair line. All right, we'll go to these rankings. There's Mostert, who's getting a lot of love in the chat. Raheem Mustard. Yes, Raheem Mustard. Leonard Fournette plays on Thursday night. You got to start him in most cases, but it's not as clear cut with that offense continuing to struggle. Jamal Williams, I think that's honestly a bearish place to put him. We could easily have him 13 or 14. And Devin Singletary going against a Green Bay defense that just does not look like itself in all phases. It's a little high for him, but I get it with the way that Buffalo gets into the end zone on a per drive basis. Devin Singletary could absolutely have a great week.
I find it hard to rank Singletary so high, not because of the player Singletary, but just because of the team. And we've talked about this so much. It's like almost insane that they just beat the crap out of a team and then they continue to just throw the ball. They just continue to metaphorically just teabag the defense. Instead of just running the game out, they just keep throwing bombs to Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs and Khalil Shakira, all these people. It's unreal what they do. And it's very impressive to watch, obviously, but it sucks for Devin Singletary. I think he is more of a tier 4 running back for me, but I get it, just like you get it, right? It makes a lot of sense. He's a good player. He's on the Bills. The Packers look dead in the water. But maybe this is the time for the Packers to rise. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think if there ever was a game, it would be in prime time.
Let's break it down real quick. Why would the projections that we use for DFS be kind of guiding people towards Devin Singletary, pushing him higher in the rankings? Well, Devin Singletary plays on a team with a Vegas implied total of nearly 30 points. That's because of the offensive power of the Bills. And yes, it is powered by the pass. The Bills pass offense first in Football Outsiders DVOA, second in yards per pass attempt. That means we can project them to be scoring points, which means we can project them to be at or near the red zone. The Packers also struggle against the run, 31st in Football Outsiders DVOA, 25th in yards allowed per rush attempt. And so if Devin Singletary is A, on the field, B, running a significant share of routes, and C, at the goal line with his team quite often against a bad defense, all of those factors are going to propel him up our rankings naturally. It doesn't mean he has to succeed. And in our gut, he might be tier 4, but this is why math and statistical based projections can help us so much. It doesn't feel good to have him at 13, but I agree with why he's there completely. Aaron Jones, who had 2 fantastic touchdown grabs, is another one where it doesn't feel great. There's still downside, but he has to be at this point because it gets really ugly after him, Sanders, Williams, after assuming Swift doesn't start, and these last 2, Fournette and Mostert. After 20, it gets bad, Nick.
Yeah, and when it comes to Aaron Jones, like I've completely just derailed any ideology that I have in my brain that AJ Dillon is going to do anything any given week. Like I know he's going to get the touches, but I have kicked like he was a guy that I was ranking consistently in the top 24 because of the magical upside that he has. I am done with AJ Dillon. Aaron Jones, when he shows up with the sombrero on, you know you got to start that guy. He's been playing really good. And I hope that the team realizes that the best way for the Packers to win is run the ball. And instead of just fucking around doing what they've been doing, they just kind of start establishing the run more because I think that's how they win games in Green Bay.
Packers look so average running the ball this year. They are 14th in yards per rush and 14th in yards or Football Outsiders rush DVOA. That's defensive value or opponent defensive value over or under average. It's a gross little acronym, but it's a really helpful stat. All right, tier 4. Let's get into it. But first, guys, before we get to this slog, this mess of a group of running backs, I'll tell you what's not a mess. Our sponsor, BetMGM, they've got their things put together. They've got their druthers about them because they have an incredible promo that I want to tell you guys about. If you haven't started over there, it's a really great time because a $10 money line bet, a pregame money line bet, $10. If anyone in the NBA hits a three-pointer the same day as that money line bet, you get $200 free in bets. That's the way to start it off. That's the way to start a new betting platform. If you haven't started at BetMGM, truly the best time to get started over there with such good sports going on. You could bet on baseball. You could bet on college football, NFL. Of course, we got you covered if you need some advice, or the Stokastic DFS and Odd Shopper channel. It's a great time for sports. It's a great time for BetMGM. Click the link in the video description below to get started on your journey to $200 free today. All right. Tony Pollard, he's way more productive on a per touch basis than Ezekiel Elliott, but the elephant in the room is Elliott. The Elliott in the room means that we cannot rank him inside the top 20. I know we have a ton of fans of him in our Stokastic DFS department, but I like a lot of players on this list more than him. Carter, because of Hall's injury. Absolutely. Even Najee Harris got more involved. Donta Foreman should see a significant role with Chuba Hubbard banged up. What are you seeing in this mess of a tier? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, that stinks because I had such a good joke and now I feel like I can't say it again. So we'll just
yeah,
go past
you
that.
ruined it. You ruined it.
I ruined it.
The room heard
Okay.
it though. I bet it was hilarious.
It was very funny. It was about how Zeke's the elephant in the room because he's so big. That was the joke. But yeah, so I agree with you. I think now what's your opinion on this? Now, I think James Robinson is more valuable than Michael Carter. I'm not sure it's necessarily this week, but I think even this week, like with how he got traded so early in the week, that James Robinson could really cut into Michael Carter's usage this week, I would think. What do you think about that?
You're right. You're right. Maybe I'm underestimating Robinson's usage. I kind of chalked it up to a similar situation as McCaffrey, but on a less productive and less efficient offense in the Jets. Maybe the fact that he's been there multiple days actually does affect things. I could see that in the range of outcomes for Michael Carter. And I think that's why we're a little bit less Excited about him. We still have him at the end of the RB2, beginning of the RB3 tier. If you need a flex running back, this isn't a bad player in Michael
Yeah,
Carter.
definitely.
But there are certainly, as we like to say, warts on the profile, similar to Montgomery. Herbert looks better on a per touch basis. Montgomery still gets the goal line touches. Hubbard had a great run. He
Yep.
hurt his hip. Kareem Hunt asking for a trade, never going to see the usage you want because of Nick Chubb. And James Conner just cannot get healthy. Benjamin is probably going to be a factor even when James Conner comes back into the fray.
Yep, I agree on that. I feel like James Conner is kind of just kind of. I'm not saying he's washed or something. I loved him going into the season, so I feel like an idiot, but he doesn't look the same as he did last year. Benjamin looks incredible. Going between Chuba Hubbard and Donta Foreman, I think because of the minor injury to Hubbard, that would kind of propel Foreman slightly. I think both of them are start worthy this week. I would lean slightly onto Foreman. And then the other guy I kind of want to talk about in this range is Brian Robinson
Yep.
Jr. He
Let's hit
didn't
that.
score a touchdown last week, still had a decent game. But again, we see that this guy is not catching passes. He's incredibly touchdown dependent unless he just runs for like 150 yards on the Colts. But when you're not catching passes, you need to score touchdowns at the running back position. You can't just run for 90 yards. Sure, that's a great game realistically in the NFL, but it doesn't mean shit in fantasy if you score 9 fantasy points, right? It's cool. Oh, look, he ran for 95 yards. That's awesome. But that's 9.5 fantasy points. You need him to either catch a couple passes or score a touchdown. And up against the Colts defense, it hasn't looked the greatest this year. I'm fine with Robinson, but all I'm saying is that I think Robinson being the guy has lit a fire under Antonio Gibson because Gibson has came out looking significantly better than he did when he was the starter. When Gibson was the starter, he looked bad, like 3.2 yards per carry. Now he's looking really good. Like that burst he had on that first down run in that game. I don't remember exactly the time.
I know
Stamp of it. It
exactly
looked
the
good.
run you're talking about, where he turned the corner to the right side and he saw the first down and he saw a sprint and he took off at full speed. And I said, "Is that Antonio Gibson?" I said something out loud when I was watching the game too. I know exactly the run you're talking about. It's funny. It's funny how sometimes that hits your eye. Ultimately, I think Brian Robinson is one of those players we need to contextualize because sometimes we get these questions like Brian Robinson or Michael Gallup. And that was a very reasonable question last week. And Michael Gallup showed us that in his range of outcomes is a 0.
Yeah.
Brian Robinson doesn't have a 0 in his range of outcomes. Assuming he starts and plays the full game, he's going to get you that 6 to 8 points. And sometimes, not all the time, that can be very, very valuable on a week-to-week game that is fantasy football. Remember that when you're comparing floor versus ceiling, his chances of getting to 16 or 17 points still capped by the other running backs on his team. I still like Robinson rest of season. Anybody else? This is a mess of a tier, but we gotta spend some time here. And also some players that aren't on this list we need to hit as well. One of them is Gus Edwards.
Yeah, we'll talk about Gus Edwards. He's in the next tier.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to this list right here, I think one of the more interesting players here is Melvin Gordon. I don't know what to do with Melvin Gordon. He was the leader in snaps. I talked about this in the waiver wire video compared to Latavius and Mike Boone. Mike Boone is now on the IR. They're saying that Mike Boone will eventually return. He had like 9 snaps and the other guy had 25 plus. So he's not really a big factor, but that does kind of just eliminate one of the players in this backfield.
Sure.
I still think Melvin Gordon is the guy to start. But if I'm being honest with you, Latavius has looked better than him, and it feels like they want Latavius to be the guy. Maybe Melvin Gordon gets traded. I mean, anything could happen before the deadline, but I don't know.
That's spicy. I kind of like that.
Yeah, did you see?
I don't hate Melvin Gordon getting traded, but I also think that with Mike Boone on IR, they legitimately need 2 running backs healthy.
Yes, they do.
They don't know what they've gotten Marlon Mack, and I'm sorry. I liked Marlon Mack coming out of school. I liked him when he was a starter for the Colts pre-Jonathan Taylor, but the guy has bounced around to multiple teams, can't really find a spot, and that usually indicates he's a league average or below player. Okay, tier 5, hit me with it. This is a spot this year especially. It hasn't been as horrific as it was earlier in the season, but this tier 5, this 33 to 50 of running back ranking has been a position where we could flex players in these spots usually, but it's been awful and it's been really hard to predict. Like players like Kenyon Drake are great examples this year where he had a great game, unpredictable because J.K. Dobbins went down in the middle of the game. And then we're all talking up Drake and his usage, and boom, number 35 on this list, Gus Edwards, comes in and steals his lunch. And I don't know if I'm willing to play Gus Edwards on Thursday night versus Tampa Bay. This is the
Why?
exact range, especially with a Thursday night player, where I don't want to be stuck in this position. Ultimately, I think unless you're really stuck because of bye weeks, I'm trying not to start Gus Edwards this week. I'm okay being wrong.
I'm a little more confident in him. He was the guy last week. He clearly is the best running back there, aside from J.K. Dobbins, who's hurt. So I think it's fine to roll out Gus Edwards. I don't have him ranked like as a top 20 back or something, but I think there's a range of outcomes where he does that. We just saw the Carolina Panthers running backs form an Eiffel Tower over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Like the Bucks defense was awful. They're not good this season. The whole team's a disaster. And look, it's hard to quantify going into the season thinking, oh, you know what? Gus Edwards in week 8, he's going to go crazy against the Bucks. But now we're here. We're in week 8. We're knocking on the door of Thursday night football. And I wouldn't be surprised if the door opens wide and Gus Edwards has 2 touchdowns again. Wouldn't surprise me. I think Gus Edwards is just that. Look, I'm one of the biggest Gus Edwards guys. I was talking up Gus Edwards all offseason. He's one of my highest owned players in best ball. Even when he was put on the IR, I just kept drafting him. Kept on drafting him, and I like what I saw. I was in on Kenyon Drake, no doubt, but once I heard the news that Gus Edwards looked like he was going to be the guy in pregame, I told everyone to flip-flop off of him, and it worked. So I think Gus Edwards, look, I'm not saying he's going to have this huge game because we fell into that with J.K. Dobbins. He scores 2 touchdowns, irrelevant the next week, and people might be burned by that, but I don't think you can necessarily look at the past like that and just say, oh, that's what's going to happen with Gus, because I don't think that's the case, because J.K. Dobbins was clearly still banged up.
What about Darrell Henderson here?
He's
essentially a starting running back going against the 49ers.
Yeah, the 49ers run defense looks pretty good. They're a little bit more healthy. I'm kind of just done with Darrell Henderson.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, it's nothing to do with necessarily Darrell Henderson. It's more to do with the fact that the Rams are just bad. Do you think they're going to fix everything coming out of the bye? Maybe they beat the 49ers, but it seems like, I don't know. It seems like the 49ers are going to be a tough match for the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The 49ers match up well defensively against anyone. And in terms of injuries and coming back from them, they've gotten healthier on the line faster than they're going to get healthier in the secondary. Their pass defense still 9th in Football Outsiders DVOA, 8th in yards allowed per pass attempt. Their run defense is top 2 in yards allowed per rush. So I get why you're concerned there. If Henderson is going to be 3rd or 4th on the passing totem pole, which he probably is, he's probably not going to be an efficient rusher. Eno Benjamin is the one who, if James Conner is out, first of all, he'll be a top 20 running back, no problem. But also, maybe he's just earned more playing time. I think in this matchup against Minnesota, a sneaky shootout game against the Vikings, I think he's the one who, by the time we get to Sunday, we might be recommending more often than this other group.
Yeah, I think Eno Benjamin is going to be more involved now. Even if James Conner plays, Eno Benjamin has looked better than James Conner has looked. He looks like he can do exactly what James Conner does, and maybe he's even more proficient of a pass catcher. I like Eno Benjamin a ton, and I would have had him ranked a lot higher than this. He would have been in tier 4 for me, even ahead of guys like Algier, Michael Carter, those guys.
And now talk to me about Khalil Herbert. Takes that awesome pass to the house on Monday Night Football. Still gets vultured every time the Bears are lucky enough to get to the goal line. David Montgomery isn't going anywhere. And honestly, I hate to say it sometimes, he looked good. He looked elusive on his touches. He looks like a decent goal line rusher as well. Herbert, a great player, top 6 in the NFL in yards per touch. You can't put him any higher than 40, but this feels like Tony Pollard, but on a worse team. We have him 17 ranks different than Pollard, though.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is. Whenever the Bears played the Commanders a couple weeks ago on Sunday Night Football live before lock, I said I think Herbert's a better player than Montgomery. It's just Herbert's never going to get the opportunity. It's basically just like what you said. Pollard is much better. You see the explosion out of Pollard. They get the ball. You give the ball to Pollard, crazy things can happen. You give the ball to Khalil Herbert, crazy things can happen. You give the ball to David Montgomery, you're going to get like 4 yards. But at the same time, David Montgomery's earned this role from his play throughout his career. He's been a decent player. I'm not saying David Montgomery's bad, but Khalil Herbert has earned more of a role. The problem is the team's not going to give that to him. They're not going to give him more of a role, and thus you can't necessarily move Herbert anywhere higher than he is right now. He has big play upside, guaranteed. He could score a touchdown or 2 against Dallas. but I wouldn't bet on that, especially against the Dallas defense. He should kind of be buried down here.
One day, Khalil Herbert. One day. What do you say we recap, starting at the beginning again, for those folks who are coming in for the first time before we hit that final sixth tier, the F tier, as the gamers say, right? So, Nick, why don't you bring us through a quick recap as we hit the bottom of the hour here for the running back position in week 8?
All right, so tier 1, these are guys you're obviously going to start, the no-brainer guys. Don't even have to think twice about it. And honestly, once you get into tier 2, it's basically the exact same thing. So tier 1, we got Josh Jacobs up against the Saints, Henry up against the Texans, Barkley up against Seattle. Again, you got to start all these guys. Josh Jacobs is on fire. Derrick Henry, it's officially Derrick Henry season where it gets a little cold. The Texans playing a dome, so I guess that won't be in much effect, but I still think he's going to have a great game. And then Barkley against Seattle, that's a lock for a big game as well. Then we got RB tier 2, 4 through 12. We got Stevenson, ETN, Walker, Elliott, Kamara, Chubb, Pierce, Taylor, Cook. We didn't really talk about Nick Chubb at all. 2 bad games in a row out of Chubb. Not necessarily bad games, right? Because he didn't score like 3 points. But, when you're not scoring 15 points plus when you're Nick Chubb, it's a bad week, in my opinion. I think he could bounce back here against the Bengals. I'm not panicking in a big way, right? I'm not super worried. Sure, maybe I'm slightly worried, but it's not like Kareem Hunt's going to steal any value from him. Kareem Hunt might end up getting traded. Then we move to tier 3. This is where things start to get a little bit more dicey. I still feel comfortable playing these guys, but again, it's definitely a big drop off, in my opinion, from tier 2 to tier 3. But I do disagree on a couple of the players that are in here. I think Mixon, McCaffrey, and Jones should be higher. So RBs 13 through 20 in tier 3 are Singletary, Mixon, McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders, Jamal with 2 A's Williams, Leonard Fournette, and Raheem Mostert. I'm a little bit more comfortable with Fournette as well than our rankings would appear. Then we move to tier 4, and this is kind of where all hell breaks loose. We've got Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, Melvin Gordon, the second or the third. I think he's actually the third, but I don't remember. Tyler Algier, Michael Carter, David Montgomery, Chuba Hubbard, Deonta Foreman.
Wait, this is
Brian
Melvin
Robinson.
Gordon's dad now is on the Broncos stealing touches from him?
Yeah, it's like Christian McCaffrey's dad's coming back to steal the touches in Denver if he went to Denver, but he didn't. Okay, so down to Foreman, Brian Robinson, James Conner, and Kareem Hunt. Out of this grouping, the most interesting player to me is probably still David Montgomery. I think David Montgomery, like we just talked about, he's still going to get the touches. The problem is he's not very explosive, but it doesn't matter if you just keep handing the guy the ball a million times. And then Swift obviously would be ranked inside of the top 5. In my opinion, he'd be in tier 1. He'd be a top 3 running back. Or top 4, I guess, given he plays against the Dolphins.
I hope so. DeAndre Swift is one of my favorite players to watch in the NFL. And that offense, DJ Chark going on IR, Jameson Williams still working his way back from injury. DeAndre Swift is a playmaker they really need, especially when TJ Hawkinson, especially when other playmakers are there, just like decides not to show up for 4 or 5 weeks in a row. DeAndre Swift against a Miami defense that is injured and struggling a little more against the pass and the run. I'd love to see Swift this week. Let's hit tier 5 one more time. Khalil Herbert's my favorite. I'm sad to say A.J. Dillon with that tough matchup against the Bills, who are number 2 in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing offenses. Just really tough to trust. Anything you want to hit here before we get to that final spot, the I'm sorry you need to start one of these players tier?
Yeah, the only reason why I'm remotely holding A.J. Dillon on any of my teams is because the off chance Aaron Jones gets hurt, and then now A.J. Dillon is just carrying the bulk of the workload, and we're just in a really good scenario with Dillon. That's the only reason why I'm holding him, because I can talk myself into the narrative where he could be really good. But if Jones doesn't get hurt again, we're not rooting for injuries, knock on wood. Man, oh man, Dillon is just in the deep depths of fantasy running back hell. So we'll pivot to the final tier here. Running backs 39 through 49. I'll just read them off for the podcast listeners. Damian Harris, Caleb Huntley, James Robinson, Rashad with 2 A's White, Antonio Gibson, Naheem Hines, Jeff Wilson Jr., Chase Edmonds, that bum, Rex Burkhead, Alexander Madison, and Don Trell Hilliard. Out of this group real quick, the guy I like the most is still James Robinson. I think James Robinson has the upside to maybe be the guy seeing a majority of the carries. Maybe I'm just way off, right? Because there's people people were trying to tell me that, oh, Nick, don't you remember James Robinson was hurt going into last game? I think that's just a big load of bullshit. Like, he wasn't actually hurt. They just used that excuse to give ETN the ball. And now he's going to show up in New York and in New Jersey in reality and be perfectly healthy. That's what I kind of think. I don't think he's actually hurt. But maybe I'm just a conspiracy theorist. Maybe I need to go get my tinfoil hat out.
Maybe. Maybe. Jeff Wilson is the one who I think might end up being the most annoying player in fantasy football rest of season. Obviously, because of the situation with Christian McCaffrey and the mouths defeat argument with George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk in that San Francisco offense. Every single time Jeff Wilson scores rest of season, you're going to hear an audible groan in the bar where you're watching, because ultimately Wilson, who looked like a decent flex start now, is the ultimate vulture on a team that loves to run the ball and can run the ball well. The Rams defense, especially against the run, is one of the only parts of that whole organization that seems like it's working correctly right now. That defensive line is absolutely awesome. I still think somebody in that San Francisco backfield gets a good score, and don't think that spike weeks are going to all go to Christian McCaffrey. I still think there's one more spike week, one more annoying spike week in Jeff Wilson's future. If you want to try to go for it this week, be my guest. After 45, though, I'm hoping to start absolutely no one from here. Chase Edmonds actually is the one where I'm a little bit more bullish than you. You just, all right, talk to me. Nicky Hard Rock. Was that the stadium? The stadium
That is
name?
the stadium. That is me. Yeah.
That's your alter ego. Your
that's my true ego. That's who I am. But yeah. So the thing is, if you rewatch fourth and three, where they try to run the ball with Edmonds after he just failed drastically on third down. You know what? Let's go back to him. This makes sense, Mike. Let's not kick the field goal. Let's have Nick burn his money because we won't cover the game because we're idiots. And they run the ball. The whole left side of the field is wide open. It splits like Moses parted the Red Sea. It's wide open. You just run to the left. And this guy is on his mark. Sanchez runs directly into the offensive line's ass. It was embarrassing. This guy's awful. He drops passes. Against the Bengals, he dropped a wide open touchdown. Tua threw a laser to him. Can't catch it. He's dropping passes. The guy's an embarrassment. Myles Gaskin is better than him, and I was a big Chase Edmonds guy. That's just how I feel about him. Jeff Wilson Jr., it's very frustrating that he wears number 22. And you're like, oh, look, it's McCaffrey. And then you quickly realize it's not McCaffrey.
Yep.
Like, oh, damn. I'm like staring at the jersey. I'm like, there he is. And it's like, oh, that's not him. Very weird. I'm surprised McCaffrey didn't try to pay Wilson for the number. Maybe Wilson wouldn't have changed, but like McCaffrey's got the bag. He could just be like, hey, pal, here's $100,000. I'm sure he would have.
Let's see what happens next year. Is my thing. We got some awesome questions coming in at here. It's about almost 10:40 a.m. on the East Coast. Who would you start flex in a full PPR? Gus Edwards, Latavius Murray, or Jerry Jeudy?
It depends. I guess if Russ is playing, you can talk yourself into Jeudy. I think I would just go with Gus Edwards. Again, these London games are just disgusting every single week. And this game literally seems like there might be 22 points scored total. So I'm not betting that, of course, because it's just going to go crazy now. But I'd go Gus Edwards.
Man, I still don't know as much as you, but I get it. Luke asks, full PPR, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, and a flex. He's got Lenny and ETN. He's got Kenneth Walker as well. JJ, Lockett, and Godwin. Who does he bench from this group? So you're starting ETN, you're starting Kenneth Walker.
Yeah.
You're probably flexing Leonard Fournette just because of the overall volume, even against Baltimore. So to me, it's Lockett and Godwin as your starters at wide receiver.
You're going to sit Justin Jefferson?
Oh, I thought it was Jerry Jeudy. I literally forgot Justin Jefferson. You're, of course, starting Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson and Godwin for me.
Yeah. I assume JJ is Justin Jefferson.
Yes,
maybe it's
you're
not,
absolutely right.
If it's Jerry Jeudy, then I would go with the other two. But if it's Jefferson, I'm going with who did you say? Jefferson and Lockett or Jefferson and Godwin?
Jefferson and Godwin.
Okay, I think Lockett's a little bit closer just because of how bad the Bucs have been. But I would still go Godwin as well. I agree with you.
Luke's got a good squad there. Pick 3, Dalvin, Leonard Fournette, Gus Edwards, Donta Foreman. So it's really, you're starting Dalvin and Leonard Fournette, cut and dry. It's Gus versus Donta Foreman. And we actually have a tool for this, guys. The Stokastic fantasy football page has a start sit tool. I'm going to link to it in the chat. And as we get into it, we can give you our gut opinion here because you asked Johnny. Thanks for being here. But we also have this available based on our projections. I'm going to link to it in just a moment.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I would make sure you guys do check that out though. It is a really cool tool. And then, if we don't answer the comments, like I get like roughly 7,000 comments to answer. If I don't answer, just go on there. Find a really good answer there for free. So I would go with I think I would lean Gus, but if you want to be safe, you can go Foreman. I think Foreman's much safer. I think Gus has higher upside and could be a bust.
Fair. Absolutely fair. And Johnny, if you want more opinions on it, you can go to the start sit tool. You can obviously ask the question here. But guys, what if there was a community of fantasy football players, like-minded fantasy football players, those who might also be into betting or DFS, and maybe you just want to have a place where you can actually talk to intelligent people about what you're trying to do with your fantasy football team 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, we've got that now with the new Stokastic Discord, combining forces with Notorious Fantasy. This is awesome, guys. This is a community of nearly 5,000 DFS players, sports bettors, and fantasy football players from the Stokastic DFS and Odd Shopper channel. This is an incredible community that we can now give you access to. I'm going to throw the link into the chat. Join our Discord today. It's awesome over there. We'll see you there. All right. Anything we want to put in tier 6? Gosh, the only player I want to highlight on the way out here is Rachaad White, because playing Baltimore, whose defense has actually been a little more banged up than people realize, a little bit worse than people realize. Leonard Fournette's been good, but he has not been a beacon of health. I think that Rachaad White, the second half of the season or the playoffs, could have a huge role, even on a struggling Tampa Bay team.
Talk about the real playoffs or the fantasy playoffs?
Fantasy playoffs, but also real.
They ain't making the playoffs.
Yes, they are. They've been this bad, and they're still tied for first.
No, I know. It's a joke. They're obviously going to make the playoffs. It's such bullshit. Like, the AFC is so hard. The Dolphins have this hard-fought move. And if they were in the NFC is so easy. I wish my team was in the NFC, but instead I have to root for the Dolphins, who I love, but it's okay. That's just a bit of a rant. I agree with you on Rachaad White, though. If something was to happen to Lenny, Rachaad White is one of the more valuable handcuffs in fantasy football. We didn't talk about Damian Harris. I think his touches, or maybe you did, and I just fucking spaced out as you were talking about him. But Damian Harris, I think he could be in a spot to potentially get more touches as the season goes along. Now, I don't think he's a guy you want to start this week, but I do think as the season goes longer, Stevenson might get touched back slightly, and then we see Harris. And I think, it's Bill Belichick offense. Harris is going to have 1 or 2 games where he just goes bananas, scores like 25 points.
It's been a wild ride for him. Never more than 3 targets in a game this season. He had 2 last week, but the carries, if that's the main source of your volume, you need some consistency in that opportunity, and that's what we're not seeing. Obviously, being worked back from injury, I get it, guys, but week 1, 9 carries. Week 2, 15. Week 3, 11. Week 4, 18. Week 5, he gets hurt, gets 4, comes back week 7 in just 3 carries. He's featured. Only 6 routes. You can't start a running back who only has 3 carries and 6 routes run. You can't do it. I get it. It could go up in volume, but this is a really, really scary week 8 play.
I'm surprised you used the term nevermore, like Edgar Allan Poe.
Nevermore. Nevermore.
Yeah, that was the poem that I wrote my final paper in college before I graduated. It was 1800s literature. I had to wait all the way until the winter to take it because they didn't have it through the 4 or 5 years I was in college.
Wait, I love this. I didn't know this about you. This is an incredible find. Okay, so as we get to the end of our running back show, I want one hot take, one thing that people don't know about 1800s literature. I want one knowledge tidbit as we end our show today.
All right. So the 1800s of literature, it was very boring, and there's a lot of words that you don't understand, which makes it even harder to read. It took me a while. We'd have to read, I think it was like 3 or 4 poems every week for this class. And literally the poems are so short because I guess they didn't have the correct knowledge that we have now to write like a solid lengthy poem. But the issue was there's a lot of words you've never heard of. And the biggest takeaway from them is that in the 1800s, life was very hard, and a lot of things that they wrote about were very sad. There was a lot of talk about death. There was a lady, I don't remember her name, and I will bring it to us tomorrow. I'll remember her name. I'll look it up. She wrote this whole story about how she was going to die in childbirth and how she wanted her family to be better and all this. It's very sad. All of those poems are very sad. And when I read them in like middle school, I didn't understand that. And the older I got, the more I understood how messed up. The fact that we had to read these things in middle school too is just crazy with how sad they were. And again, I am a historian technically. I graduated with a history degree. It's hanging on the wall over there. But I don't have the biggest takeaways from the 1800s of poetry.
Okay, that's fair, and also just truth. Slice of life is important to realize. Didn't realize you were such you're a man of culture. Follow him at Notorious FNTSY for memes of culture and his Dolphins takes, along with all his fantasy football takes, and that's where you'll find all the stuff he's working on. He's also got the Notorious Fantasy channel by Stokastic. Definitely follow him over there. My name is Matt Savoca at Draftaholic. We've got live streams for you every single day here on the Fantasy Stream. We also got the start sit video coming out later this week. We had the waiver wire video. We got everything for you to win your championships this season. Make sure to take advantage of the awesome offers from our friends over at BetMGM. Ask Nick or me if you need any questions, if you have any questions about how to place that pregame moneyline bet so you get that $200 free. And join the community today on the Discord. We can't wait to talk to you there, as well as see you next time on the Fantasy Football Channel. We'll be back 10 a.m. tomorrow talking wide receivers. For Nick, I'm Matt. We'll see you guys later.